I will say this. During the broadcast last night, many of you don't know this and probably don't care, but for this story to give it some context, when I got out of college, there was no such thing as really sports talk radio. It didn't really exist. It was in New York and Philadelphia, really at the very beginning, but that was 30 years ago. So if you wanted to be a sportscaster in America 30 years ago, like I did as a kid, I wanted to be a sportscaster when I was 8, and now I'm 50. So when I was a kid, I was going to do local sports. I mean, ESPN was new. Forget about Fox Sports 1. Forget about all these cable venues and sports channels and Golf Channel. None of that stuff existed. The internet didn't exist. So when I was a kid, if you wanted to be a sportscaster, you did local TV, and then eventually there was national networks where you could be, but there were so few jobs at NBC Sports and ABC Sports. You know, you'd have your Kurt Gowdy or Keith Jackson, but I was, I'm 22 years old. You're not going to get a job like that. So I did play-by-play out of college. I did AAA baseball play-by-play and some college basketball, and I did a few college football games for UNLV. Outside of hockey, I've done play-by-play. But the one thing I know about all the play-by-play disciplines, baseball's the hardest. And last night, Jessica Mendoza made history in the American League wildcard broadcast, and she was the first woman to be broadcasting a nationally televised playoff baseball game. Here's a sample of her work. I thought she was fine. I think it's incredibly difficult to do this. I've done play-by-play on baseball. Here's the thing. There's not a single national baseball broadcaster, analyst, or play-by-play that's moving the ratings up or down right now. John, and frankly, in the history of the business, very few broadcasters, period, can move a needle. The people that can move a needle are in the opinion business. Bill O'Reilly can move a needle. They're like when you're a talk show host. If Glenn Beck takes the day off, his audience shrinks. If Rush Limbaugh takes the day off, his audience shrinks. Radio, cable TV, Tom Brokaw was not in the opinion business. If you're not in the opinion business, you're not moving a number. Tom Brokaw left NBC. Brian Williams stepped in. Ratings didn't move an inch. And Tom Brokaw was beloved in America, and they didn't move an inch. So it just, if you think Jessica Mendoza, I on Twitter last night, apparently it was just vile and she's terrible and I'll never listen. They used to say that about Tim McCarver. It just is irrelevant. Tim McCarver wasn't helping or hurting ratings. Was he helping or hurting the broadcast? But nobody turns off a playoff game because of the announcer. They don't. People on Twitter say that. People have been saying it forever. It's just not true. John Madden is one of the only people, if not the only analyst in game that moved a number. You know what moves a number? Fantasy football and gambling. People will stay watching terrible games if they've got a bunch of fantasy players on the Atlanta Falcons or Houston Texans in a blowout game. That's what moves the number. That's what keeps the audience around. It's not play-by-play. And I've done play-by-play. Let me tell you something. Baseball is tough. It is slow. It's a 4-hour car ride. You've got to fill in a lot of space. It's incredibly difficult. And so when people are ganging up on Jessica Mendoza, she's an All-American, 4-time, really talented, did some regular season work. The Yankees have a woman, Susan Waldman, on the air, and they've had her for several years, and she's just cackling and screaming, and it's not listenable, and it doesn't help or hurt those ratings whatsoever. So people listen. I heard it was really ugly last night, and people were like, I'm never watching again. It is one of the biggest myths in this business of how few people, especially in the game broadcasting business, play-by-play and analysts. I mean, I think Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are terrific, and they certainly make it better than a couple of guys that were on the air that would be bad. They make the broadcast. I mean, Al Michaels is terrific. Joe Buck is terrific. All these guys, Kevin Burkhardt here, they're all terrific. That's not the issue. But the issue is I've never once said in my life, I'm going to go watch this game because Mike Tirico's doing it. I watch the game because I want to watch the game. He can augment it and help it, but I don't watch the Wimbledon because Chris Fowler's doing it. I watch the Wimbledon because I like to watch tennis. So it's this whole thing about she's going to hurt, I'll never listen again. It's a bunch of hooey. I've been in this business 30 years. It is complete, absolute hooey.